The advice for players is running away is an option.
You're not wrong.
Welcome, Eugenio, and welcome back, Lexi. How y'all doing?
Oh my goodness. So excited.
Yeah.
This is great.
And are you excited for like anything in particular, a place that we might be going?
I gotta make some noise for knights and Arthurian legends and fairy tales. Somebody's gotta do it.
We are talking today about the Monstrous Compendium Volume 4, Eldraine Creatures, which for folks like me who might be relatively new to this setting full of wonder and whimsy and terrifying danger, checks notes, is a setting that is a collaboration with our friends at Magic the Gathering, who recently released the Wilds of Eldraine set, a follow-up to the Throne of Eldraine, which tracks this very cool fairy tale world in the wake of some bad stuff happening. What we're actually getting here is over 24 monsters from Eldraine inspiration for our Dungeons & Dragons games, ranging from the cute and creepy Gingerbrute and Sweet Tooth horror through new Fey court adventures, through some nightmare creatures in there, and of course, big ol' friendly giants like the Beanstalk Worm. And today's focus, the magic-wielding Warlock Dragon, known as the Witchkite.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Applause track.
Yes. we're all clapping.
Cheers and screams.
Let's talk about the Witchkite. This CR15 Warlock Dragon is now available for our games. And Eugenio, I'd love, what are your first thoughts on this big, scary, cool, entrancing creature?
So one of the first things that I looked at, because it's one of the first things I always look at a new dragon, because what do we think about when we think dragons? We think breath weapon. It's not exactly a breath weapon, which already immediately caught my eye, right? Instead of a breath weapon, the Witchkite has what's called a malevolent flare, where it is spitting fire. So there's still fire from mouth, right? But it is, say it with me now, green flame. None of you knew what I was going to say, so you didn't say it with me, but you would have.
I would have.
You make a saving throw as always. And what I first looked at was, it does 5d8 fire damage. That is surprisingly little for a CR15 dragon. I thought, okay, well, there's got to be something else. And then, of course, you start looking at, in addition to the fire damage, there are two other things. Already I'm sold. We have a dragon that has an interesting, mechanically different breath weapon. Sold. So for this one, you can give them more damage, which balances that out a little closer to an adult dragon of this CR, although it's still the damage of the weapon still a little lower on the scale than you would think to find. Or, and this is my favorite, and Lexi and I were talking about this before we got on, so I won't talk about all of it, but you can also get the target to use a reaction, because it is single target, to use a reaction to attack another creature of the Witchkite's choice. So now we're damaging, but all dragons damage, right? Now, though, we're crowd controlling, we're mind controlling, we're using PCs against PCs. Things suddenly got much more interesting.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I love that you called out the damage difference, because I noticed that about the block as well, and I also noticed that Malevolent Flare doesn't have a recharge.
It does not. Sorry,
ready.
I skipped right over
goodness.
that. It doesn't. And you know, there's one other thing that I didn't notice the first time I was going through, which is if you look at the Witchkite's multi-attack, normally your multi-attack for a dragon is 2 claws and a bite, right? Or you can breath weapon. Not so for the Witchkite. The Witchkite's multi-attack is 2, they're not claws, they're rending attacks, and this malevolent flare breath. So whereas, you're only doing 5d8 of damage with the breath weapon, but you're also getting to do 2 3d6 plus 6 rend attacks. That's a lot of damage.
Yeah. Lexi, first thoughts?
That's very wild. I think my brain kind of short-circuited starting to read the stat block, because specifically it's a huge dragon that's a warlock. So I feel like it's something interesting that it is incorporating this storytelling mechanic by giving you not just a class, but sort of like motivations. You can derive a lot of story juice from just that without reading how many hit points it has, what even alignment it is, how any of that kind of stuff. You can just kind of throw it into your game and automatically understand the vibes that warlocks give off. If you have a warlock in your party, it's immediate, like you have candy right there. And that for me is like mind blowing. I really like that addition of throwing this, like we were talking about the CR, other CR dragons that are here. You're just getting your like copper, your bronze, your sapphire, moonstone, and those don't have a specific class tied to them. They have alignments and background. This automatically comes with like a nice bow wrapped around it of here's how to play this Witchkite. Like go for it.
And I believe we've had a couple of specific examples where dragons have had this, as we see in some other kinds of creature blocks, class assigned, but I don't think we have another world. I think this is Witchkite breaking some new creepy magical ground. And I love, thank you for bringing this up, because I love the general description of what makes this dragon different. Ties in perfectly with that. We have, while many dragons of Eldraine hoard wealth and material goods, Witchkites prefer hoarding forbidden and dangerous magical secrets. The arcane nature of a Witchkite's hoard seeps into the dragon's core, granting it spellcasting abilities, and twisting its fiery breath into malevolent motes of magical flame, which is just delicious. And there are some notes in here as well about the other dragons of Eldraine and how you could map them over to D&D, which is so delicious because there's something called an archive dragon. And I was not aware of this, and now I know what I want to be when I grow up, and it's a whole situation.
And also, this release recommends using a Moonstone Dragon, one of my darling children from Fizbin's, for that archive dragon, so also a favorite of mine.
We have a big old scary warlock who is going to do some consistent damage along with clawing at you. Just a lot going on already. What are some of the battlefield considerations that we might want to keep in mind for running the Witchkite?
Yeah,
Lexi?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing with this is that with both the Rend and the Malevolent Flare, they both have the keyword of melee in them. Obviously, the Rend is a reach of 10 feet, so you can kind of be lenient with that. But in order for your players, like if someone fails that save for Malevolent Flare, they've got to use a reaction to make a melee attack. It can't be like a spellcaster that's going to, cast fireball somewhere and really do damage. It's got to be someone up close doing damage to someone else. So keeping that consideration of your party being scrunched together. I'm a big fan of lair action. So anything that keeps them close together. So this, whether Rend can hit them, or you could possibly pull some trickery about making them just hit one after another. Everyone.
Oh my gosh, just the confusion line going down, that is terrifying. And truly, you were halfway through that advice where I was like, but that seems dangerous. Oh, this is DM advice. Oops. That is.
Oh, were we supposed to give players advice? Because I don't think Lexi or me is going to do that.
The advice for players is running away is an option.
Yes. You're not wrong.
You could get some XP just for living through this
just
thing.
Talk to them, then leave.
And then leave.
Eugenio, what about you? Battlefield considerations for players or DMs?
So it's so interesting because for me, when I think of dragons, right, the one thing that is sometimes hard to do to balance with dragons in a fight is having them fly. They're all very fast. They can all fly. A lot of them can fly out of the range of most spells and half the ranged weapons in a single turn, right? So one of the things that I think about once I've sort of read through the block is I start looking at what the speed is and what these tactics might be. On the one hand, Lexi has brought up, it's got Rend attacks that require melee. You want the players clumped together so that they can beat each other when you use Malevolent Flare on it. But what it doesn't immediately answer for me is, okay, does this dragon like to be up close and personal, or does it like to fly high, protect itself, and do its thing? And I actually think, and I would almost never give this advice for a dragon, because you have to be real careful about sitting them on the ground and letting players come up to them, because then they just become a sack of hit points with a breath weapon, right? But what's really interesting about this one is we have these Rends, which are quite powerful. We want the party together because of Malevolent Flare. If they get mind controlled, they got to hit somebody in range. But one of the things we haven't talked about is this this dragon's anti-fighter and anti-barbarian reaction. It's called Enchanting Gaze, and I'll just read it. It says, when a creature the Witchkite can see moves within 10 feet of it. The Witchkite emits an enchanting gaze at the creature. The creature must succeed on a fairly high DC 17 wisdom saving throw or take 3d psychic damage. Sure, let's do more damage. The important part, and have the charmed condition until the end of its next turn. Now, you're not going to use this charm condition in the middle of combat, right, to make the barbarian your best friend, but you are going to make it so that barbarian can't attack you next round. The charm condition gives you advantage on social checks, blah, blah, blah. But in a combat context, it means you can't attack the charmer. So anybody who doesn't make that reasonably high wisdom save and tries to run up and melee this creature is not going to be able to. So if they don't get your barbarians...
I don't want it anymore.
I just don't feel like
No. Can I unrage?
If you miss... if you miss your barbarians with the mind control... Oh, you... I didn't even think about that. This drops barbarian rage in with a reaction if you're not careful. That's huge.
You gotta hit, like... Be like, buddy, take one, just punch him in the shoulder. Be like, I need my
players run.
Yeah, right?
It, run.
Or just the barbarians just throwing javelins from 15 feet for its life. But so there's a lot of this, I think, is a largely on the ground melee close quarters dragon, which is really interesting.
I love that as an angle of the sort of, the witchiness of this is like luring you in close, and that's where it's the worst. That's pretty rad as these things go. And of course, we have an additional reaction available to the Witchkite.
Yes.
If you haven't used your Enchanting Gaze, which is just straight up goes off anytime someone moves within 10 feet of you, you've got your Retribution. Immediately after taking damage from melee attack, the Witchkite makes one rend attack against the attacker. So just a little swipe back.
Truly love it.
The other thing, since we're talking about the reactions, I will mention the one other thing, which is that the Witchkite gets 2 per round. So nerf the barbarian, make them lose their rage, and then also when the fighter breaks through and does hit you, hit them right back.
Yep. And you, of course, you have your legendary resistances because you are a full scary dragon at this point. So the strategies for taking you down might get kind of complicated. But what kind of strategies can you deploy against our courageous and or hapless players? Let's talk about spellcasting. Eugenio, what would be a fun or scary way to use the Witchkite's spellcasting?
Well, the Witchkite has both Dimension Door and Hold Monster. So that's awful. Let me look real quick because I don't remember the range on Hold Monster, but I imagine it's probably feet. 60 feet. Yeah. 90.
Yeah, it's messed up. It's messed up.
Okay, well, even more. So you get this Witchkite, right? From also it's proficient in stealth. It's only a +5 because they're big boys, but still +5 in stealth. You get them somewhere out of line of sight. The party doesn't know them. Holds the wizard all the way in the back, right? Because that's a range thing that's going to be more of a problem for this dragon. And then Dimension Door on top of your melee fighters. That sounds fun to me.
This is...
no one's going to want to play with me anymore.
The police are already on their way. That is malicious. I truly cannot condone this behavior, but I bow to you.
Even better, before you hold them, cast Detect Thoughts on someone in the party to try and figure out who's most likely to fail their Hold Monster save. Now, listen, I'm being very antagonistic as a DM in this moment. I'm giving you the worst case scenario. You all know your tables better, and you know how much of that you want to use.
But for the right party,
drill it down.
Yeah, and I think also depending on what Detect Thoughts might be, depending on how technical you want to go with it. I think when players use it, there's this beautiful story moment where you, as the DM, the person covering up the entire world they have no access to yet, they have to access the world through you. You get to reveal thoughts. But who's to say that Detect Thoughts, if it fails and that you just get surface level thoughts, who's to say that you don't get their stat block? Like they're the player's stat block. So you can literally see who has the weakest resolve against your attacks.
how often are the surface level thoughts really just like, I am barbarian?
Swing.
Like, that's legit.
Right, swing. Or maybe you've got some sort of spellcaster who's just like, oh, it's a new dragon. I hope they don't try and do this to me, or I hope that, you could use anything, right? If we're already holding Monster and Dimension Dooring in anyway, take what you can get.
I agree. Dimension Door has this wonderful text on it that says, in the words of, our lords, the player's handbook, you can bring along objects, you can bring along willing creatures. If you arrive in a place occupied by an object or a creature, you and the creature traveling take 46 force damage and the spell fails to teleport you. So like, just as a little treat, just tell it like, they're willing, they're charmed by you. Just do a quick 46 force damage. It's like sadly to you, but like I feel like if this dragon's on their way out, that's a great way to emphasize how dangerous it is to be charmed.
That's very rad. Oh my gosh.
Also, with an average hit points of 220, 46 is fine. Nothing. I'll take it.
Absolutely.
These are incredibly cool and sinister ideas, and I'm very excited about them.
Yeah.
Speaking of the spells that come with this particularly witchy dragon, this dragon has an unusual hoard. As I mentioned earlier, it collects dangerous magical secrets. If you're running a game and you're putting a Witchkite in it, what might you put in that hoard, Lexi?
Ooh, well, something that's big in Wilds of Eldraine and in Magic in general are these specific types of cards called ley lines. If you have them in your hand when you start the game, you can start the game with the card already on the board, and they automatically affect everything, like everyone's play state. It's very, very cool. And so I'm a big fan of using those in my games as ways to both enhance magic in certain places, especially. You have Strixhaven, where you have the snarls, where magic is kind of like the weave is just like really surging in a specific place. Any kind of map that can detect ley lines or snarls or rips and tears in the weave, that is important for your spellcasters. And even if you don't have spellcasters, to have your martial players stumble across, oh, this is just a stupid little map. And they show up to a powerful wizard and they're like, oh, we've also got this weird little map. Don't know if you can read it. And it just turns out to be a tide turning, battle winning map for them to like send them on their final quest to tear the weave into magic that they can use. That's like so baller. Like that's a great idea in my opinion.
That's fantastic.
I love ley lines. They're so juicy. They're so perfect.
Yes.
Eugenio, I love that. So is there like, what's another direction we can go with our magical hoard?
I'd put a sentient weapon or a sentient item in there and let that, whether it is or not, let the Witchkite think that is its patron, right? Because it says that it gets its magic, at least in part, from the hoard, the arcane nature of the hoard seeping into it. So there's a warlock, its patron is its hoard in some kind of way, right? Let it be a sentient weapon. Let it talk. Let it have a story. Let it have given this Witchkite its powers for a reason. Let that be your next, if you can get your hands on it, either by killing or stealing. But listen, sentient items, it does mean you as the DM have to remember that they exist and talk occasionally. But if you can get past that hurdle, love me a sentient item, especially for something like this.
Oh, yeah. Like you said, you have to remember that they exist, but I imagine that if a party is fighting this, they need whatever's in the hoard. They either need to fight the dragon and defeat the dragon, or they need whatever's in the hoard. So whatever you put there is really going to be real fruit to your players, honestly.
It's such a rich angle to go down because inherently, if you encounter this situation, you know that you are meeting something whose sentience was a match for a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right.
Not necessarily got the better of, but like that is you not necessarily corrupted, but empowered. Like you were embedded with this incredibly powerful dragon mind. How are you going to do with our sorcerer?
Exactly.
You know? Let's find out.
Yeah.
That is so
that.
Cool. So, okay, we know what we might find at the end of the battle or confrontation with the Witchkite, or stealing in while they're not there. What kind of adventure might you want to use to drop this creature in, Eugenio?
There are two creatures or two things that immediately came to mind when I thought about this. The first is, I don't know necessarily what the story is, what the adventure is, but you have got to pair Witchkites with Aleps, which is from Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. They are, I think, undead creatures that form when usually a spellcaster discovers some horrendously cursed secret knowledge, and they become Aleps. I don't know who's in charge, if it's the Aleps or the Witchkite, right? There's a version where the Witchkite takes the Aleps, extracts their secrets from them, and then uses them to guard the horde. There's also a version where the Aleps are coming for the dragon to get their secrets. So that's, in terms of what creature to pair, number one. Number two, the Witchkite, you can do anything you want with the Witchkite and Eberron's Draconic Prophecy. One Witchkite lives somewhere in Arganessen and knows a thing about that's so generic, right? But the flavor of this Witchkite and the fact that it's Horda's secrets and the fact that it's a warlock suddenly turned that very, to be honest, very sort of standard Eberron story, right? About the Draconic Prophecy, and makes it so much twistier and more interesting.
And Lexi, what might you do with a Witchkite in a story?
Yeah, I mean, I think that warlock aspect is too juicy for me to not use. And I think a plotline a lot of people pull on when they build their warlocks is this idea of being led into thinking possibly their warlock is good, like their warlock patron is good. Even having a paladin who has pledged themselves to a patron and they don't realize, you're not smiting. That's not smite damage. Like, you can make your class that, but technically you're doing something different. I love the idea of your paladin has gone down this whole road of figuring out who they've actually pledged themselves to, make it through this thick forest and stumble across this like circus with the Palace of Mirrors. And these mirrors, just, I love lair actions. So these mirrors being able to make duplicates of everyone in the party, essentially once per turn. At the top of the round, you roll for who the duplicate makes. It could be anyone, you could have any number in this thing, but the fight of the paladin realizing it's their patron, fighting, and like even maybe the magical mysteries being locked in the mirror, trapped in the mirror. So every mirror shattered is some sort of like new spell or like new magic item that like crashes to the ground. But part of that is it gives your players the advantage of being able to make duplicates and have that kind of minor illusion and just being able to dupe the dragon with all of the weird, cool psychic damage stuff going on. But then it also allows your dragon to really play along with that. And I really think it would be fun if you did it online, but in person, trying to set up little tiny mirrors and like have to figure out line of sight. Can the dragon see you? Or is it looking at your duplicate? Let's roll for if it hits you or your duplicate. Oh, it would be so great. And this Witchkite taking down the big top at the end, that's so cool. So cool.
This is a whole... I need to begin this game immediately as soon as we're done here.
We play at 7, okay?
Yes.
I'll see you in a couple of hours.
Meet back here.
Yes.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And I know, do you have any tips, Lexi? I know you have a little affection for the Eldraine setting. For folks who might be venturing into these wilds for the first time, anything you might want to... fairy tale warnings to hand to them as they go on their journey?
Absolutely. You're going to find all of your favorite fairy tale stories, your archetypes, your knights, your castles, your fairies, your even your little gingerbread man running around in this set. I highly recommend just explore. This is a great set to kind of grab a pack. You're going to see a lot of things and if you don't know it, it's good to just look it up. But these are like very highly playable cards and highly playable story characters too. The world building potential with this is so rife. So highly recommend just like bring your love of fairy tales and stories to this set and this book.
I love that. You can start plugging elements from this into maybe your next campaign of The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. You can pair some of these things really nicely with your Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants. You can make up your own thing entirely, or you can just run a game in Eldraine. That is all coming our way with the Monstrous Compendium 4 Eldraine Creatures out right now. terrify your friends and frenemies with the Witchkite today. Thank you both to my guests for joining me. Where can people find you, Eugenio?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me, Amy. I always love getting to chat with you. And Lexi, it's been a pleasure, of course. Y'all can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at DM Jazzy Hands, and on Twitch at the same.
I am very much in the same place, Twitter, Blue Sky, Twitch under at Black Girl Mage.
Grab these creatures, bring them to your table for D&D adventures, and we will see you next time on D&D Beyond.